All right. We'll go ahead and give you just one more minute to kind of fill out the poll. That way we know exactly where we should be focusing our time on. Looks like we have a little bit of everything for the key features. So I'll be sure to at least touch a little bit of anything. But if there's anything in this poll that's missing that you'd like to see, please feel free to leave it in the chat or the Q&A. But we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining. My name is Lance. I'm the Senior Product Specialist here at LabKey. I help organizations understand our Sample Manager product as well as our LabKey LIMS product to see if it's the right fit for them and help onboard, implement new software, and be that point of contact for customer support. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about our software Sample Manager. Sample Manager is a great software for labs that are needing to organize their data and kind of get a hold of everything. So I'm going to start with a little bit more about who I am, who LabKey is as an organization, and then we're going to dive into the software itself. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll try to answer them towards the end of this demo. So a little bit more about myself. I used to be in an infectious disease and microbiology laboratory for organ and tissue donation. So we were processing thousands of samples every day, running them through different assays, making sure that we had all the results that we needed, and tracking where all of our samples were in storage was very important. So I'm very familiar with a bunch of different limbs, Excel spreadsheets, paper records, a lot of what our labs are coming from that have been using in the past. But I'm really excited about how Sample Manager and Limbs takes a lot of the good aspects of those softwares and improves on them, and then takes a lot of the bad aspects of those and actually improves those characteristics and one easy to use software. So LabKey started over 20 years ago with part of the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center here in Seattle, Washington. And since then, we've grown and we've partnered with a bunch of different organizations and a bunch of different labs to really manage their scientific data. So with all of our clients, we partner with them, make sure that they have all the customer support that they need. We help to configure and onboard and implement their new software. And then we work very closely with them to help have expansions within their institution to help them all save on money. But we also make sure that they have customer support at every single point of time that they need it. But then we also work closely to develop our products further. So Sample Manager has monthly updates based off of feedback we get from our users to make sure we're growing in ways that are expected. So with Sample Manager, we really focus the software on three main pillars. We have data integrity. So we want to make sure that the data you have is accurate and it's protected and it makes sense for what you're capturing, right? So if you have a date field, like you're capturing a collection date, it should only be a date. It shouldn't be free text that we see happens with Excel spreadsheets, because that makes it really hard to search through all of your samples and kind of query that information. We also have very robust sample traceability. So not only should you be able to know exactly where your sample is in storage, but you should know where it came from, what patient it came from, what child samples does it have, where is it in its life cycle? Is it available? Is it under a QC review? What tests need to be ran on that specific sample? So we make it really easy to kind of track that sample at every point of its life. And then our system's also very flexible. So today we're looking at something that's a little bit more clinical based. So it has like blood samples, serum, plasma, but the beauty of our software is that it's very science agnostic. So you can have as many different sample types as you need, as many different data fields as you need. We make it very easy to configure the system to match your specific needs. So that way you don't really have to adapt your lab to what the software is telling you you have to do. And so today we're going to be looking at Sample Manager Starter, Sample Manager Professional, and I do have an example of our calculated fields pulled up in LIMS, but we're going to be really focusing on these two softwares today. And we have these different tiers to make sure you're paying for what you need, and you don't necessarily have to upgrade if that doesn't make sense for you. But if your lab grows and you do need to upgrade, you can do that at any point in time. So Sample Manager Starter is really focusing on that storage management, tracking your metadata for your samples, knowing where they are with their lineage, and having an audit trail. Sample Manager Professional has all of that, but it also includes manual workflow management. So you're tracking step-by-step SOPs, manual assay data management where you're tracking your test results. It has an electronic lab notebook to capture your experimental notes or replace paper records, and it also has calculated columns. Our LabKey Limbs focuses more on automation, but then it also goes into plate management and visualization tools so you can create graphs and charts. And then we have our LabKey Limbs enterprise system that's looking at integrating with a bunch of different systems, different instruments, and visualization integrations. And then it has some more developer tools for those that kind of need that aspect. So today we're going to be looking at Sample Manager Professional and Starter, but of course, if you want to see more, feel free to contact us. We can definitely demo these other systems as well. So let's go ahead and get started. And of course, as we look at the software, leave your questions in the chat, leave them in the Q&A, and we'll be able to answer them at the end of this demo. So when I log into Sample Manager, this is going to be my home page. You can see I have a breakdown of all my different sample types and kind of where they are in their life cycle, if they're available, if they're consumed. All of these sample types were something that I said we were capturing, and then these statuses were all using language that we use in the lab. So these are all configurable to meet your lab specific needs. When I scroll down, I have my different storage units, and this is a dynamic list. So this is always going to be changing depending on which boxes were recently used to check samples in. So I can see that box one recently had DNA and PBMC samples added to it, and then this box two had some blood samples to it. So we'll show you which space is available, what sample types there are to make it a little bit easier to grab what you need. We also have our jobs list. So these are tasks that have been assigned to myself. So I know exactly what I need to be doing. When I log into the system, I can see I have this user conference job that's well overdue. I should probably get on that probably a few months ago. And then we have our notebooks. So these are our electronic lab notebooks where we're capturing our experimental notes. It's going to pull up the ones that we've recently logged into and started using so I can quickly get back to whatever it was I was working on. To navigate through Sample Manager, we have this dashboard, and this allows us to look at our data in a few different segments. So we divide our data into source types, which is where your samples are coming from. Usually that's something like a patient, a specific study, a CRO, or partner you're working with. It's where those samples are coming from. We have our sample types, which is the physical things you're working on. So that's usually like blood, DNA, plant stems, mineral deposits, whatever it is you're working on, you would have it right here. We have our assays. So these are the tests we're running on our samples. We have our storage units. So that can be incubators, liquid nitrogen tanks, freezers, fridges, workbenches, wherever you're putting your samples. Then we have our workflow jobs. So those are our step-by-step SOPs we're working with. Our pick lists, which is like the list of samples I need to keep track of, are in our notebooks. We also allow you to partition your data through folders. So if some teams need access to data under Project Alpha, they can have access to that folder, but then they wouldn't have access to anything under Project Beta unless they were assigned permissions to view that. So it makes it just a little bit more easy to kind of view that information. So I'm just going to the demo project because that's where a lot of our information is for our demos. And let's go ahead and look at our blood samples. So when I log in, I can see I have all of these different samples registered for blood, and it has a bunch of these different columns. So these data columns are things that I've said are important for us to capture for our blood samples. You can configure this to have as many or as few different data fields as you need, and you can have different types of data fields. You can have drop downs, you can have free text, date fields, time fields, lots of different things to kind of make it easier to capture your information. All of these columns are also filterable. So if I wanted to look for all my samples that were plasma samples, and maybe I want to see everything that's currently in storage, I can filter through this to narrow down whatever it is I'm looking for to make it easier to kind of navigate through my system. When you're in this grid, you can select whichever samples you want to work with. You can edit them, derive them, or create child samples off of them, assign them to a test, assign them to a workflow job, move them around in storage. Or you can even download them into a CSV, Excel, or TSV file. So if you're shipping samples out from one location to another, super easy to get that electronic manifest to whoever needs to receive that information. But let's go ahead and pull up one of my favorite samples, Blood Force 733. This just has a lot of information on it, so I like to use it for my demos. When I click on it, I can see where it is in storage. I can see how many aliquots were created from this and how many of those are available, what notebooks were referenced in it, and then I have its metadata down below. If I go to the lineage tab, we're going to show you how this sample is related to everything else in the laboratory. So I can see that this blood sample came from this specific mouse, and this specific mouse is part of this specific study, and I can click around them to kind of get some more details on every level. But then I can also see what derivatives it has. So this blood sample went to PBMC, and these PBMC samples went to DNA. I can also see it has these 5 aliquots, which are basically like clones of that sample. And I can kind of double click on these to kind of jump around. I can see all of these samples from this mouse. And of course, when you have a lot of samples like these visuals aren't always useful. But if I go to that mouse's page, and if I click on samples, we're going to list every single thing that came off of that mouse for really easy access of doing a different analysis of what samples we have. We also have this assays tab for both our source layer, so where your samples are coming from, and the samples. And if I'm on this mouse, I can see all the different test results it has. So you might imagine this might be really useful for a study, or if you're tracking test results for a patient over a period of time, you can see when things may be changing. So we could see, wow, this white blood cell count is really high compared to everything else. There might have been something wrong with data entry, our instrument, or maybe something's going really wrong with this specific mouse. So it makes it really easy to kind of keep track of all of your data in one easy to use location. Going back to our sample, we also have a sample-centric audit log, and this one is really, really long because I'm always using it for these demos. But this is going to show everything that's happened to a sample from the moment we register it all the way to when we consume it. Even after you consume that sample and dispose of it, we'll keep hold of this so you can go back and kind of reference what's been done to the sample. So here you can see that I updated it, Lance did. Back in 2023, it was for my demo, and I changed the amount by 0.5 ml. So we keep track of everything, just in case something goes wrong, you have an audit, a sample's missing, you can do an investigation very easily. But now let's go ahead and look at the storage for our samples. So I'm going to click on the sample's specific storage location. I did it on the sample page, but I could have also done it from the grid view we saw earlier. And it's bringing me to this box map of where the sample is. And it's going to highlight the exact row and column that it's in. And it's also going to have the sample's metadata to the right. So I have more context of what it is I'm looking at. Because if I just click over here, blood 12446 really doesn't mean that much to me. I want some more context of what it is I'm working with. When I'm in this view, I can also check out a sample, move it around, remove it from storage. I can also do that from this grid view we saw earlier, but this is kind of more of a visual of what we're doing. So let's go ahead and check out this sample. I'm just typing in the reason for doing it. It's going to be in my audit log. When we check a sample out, we're going to highlight this as pink because we're assuming whenever you're done checking it out, you're going to check it back into that exact location. So we're just reserving it so no one else can put it in. If you want to free it up, you can move it to like a workflow or a workbench. You can remove it from storage, whatever it is you need to do. But now let's go ahead and check it back in. It's going to ask me how much I used. So let's just say we're using 0.5 ml, and it's going to ask if we want to increment our freeze thaw count, which is something that's really important for things like DNA. And if you can kind of see in the background, we currently have an amount of 1 ml and a freeze thaw count of 27. So when I check it in, we're going to reduce the amount that's available and we're going to increase that freeze thaw count. So we have some real-time updates of what's going on with these samples. That way we're not trying to pull an empty tube out of the freezer because that gets annoying really, really fast. I've done it when I was in the lab. Not fun. But I just showed how you can do it with one sample. You can do it with multiple samples at once or one at a time, kind of depending on whatever it is that you need to do. You can also do it when they're in multiple boxes from that grid view, just to make it a little bit easier. But let's say we're going to actually go ahead and move this sample. So when I'm going to move it, we're going to show how much free space we have in a freezer and our shelves and our boxes. That way I'm not trying to pull a box that's completely full because that's really annoying when you're opening up your freezers, trying to find an empty box, that just leaves risks for your freezers breaking. So I just moved it here. We're going to automatically assign it to the first available location. So it makes those moves really easy. Of course, you can do that with one or more sample. Going to our workflow jobs now, let's say we have a task we want to run on our specific samples. So we're going to use this user conference job. Here you can see I have these lists of tasks I need to do. These are all configurable to match what your SOPs look like. So we're receiving our blood tubes, we're taking aliquots, and then we're going to run assays on them. When I'm assigned to these tasks, I'll receive an email saying, hey, I have this task assigned, and it's also going to be on my front page of Sample Manager. You can also have a notify list for a user or group of users. So if you have a manager that needs to oversee everything, you can easily do that. And then you can also assign job details. Like if you're shipping samples out, you can easily have a tracking number that's going to be associated with every single sample in that job. And if I click on the samples tab, I can see everything that's currently assigned to the specific job. So if they were in storage, I could quickly pull where they were. I can also go through these tasks and import our data for our assays. So this chemistry is only for these blood samples. It's not going to have the PBMCs because that's the requirement we had that they had to be a blood sample. And then I can import my test results, either manually entering them, importing from a file, or using API to import that data from another system. So it makes it really easy to kind of associate all the results we need. That would then be associated with that workflow job, and then we can kind of progress from there. Another item I do want to show that's kind of related to the data associated with our samples are our calculated columns. So this is LabKey limbs, but calculated columns are also within professional. This is just an example we have very quickly. So this is our processing window, and this processing window right here is looking at how long it took from the samples collection date to when we actually processed it, and it's going to tell us how many days that took. Within LabKey limbs, we also have conditional formatting where we can highlight things that are outside of a certain range. So anything that's greater than 2 days, it's going to be highlighted in red to kind of show, hey, there might be an issue with these samples very quickly, so we can kind of address them with whoever we may need to reach out to. So those calculated columns are great from quality checks. You can calculate concentrations. You could be like, if this field equals this, then this other field should equal that. Very, very cool. And we can do a lot of things with these specific calculations. Going into our electronic lab notebooks, this is a great way to kind of keep track of our experimental notes. So our ELNs allow you to have templated functions. So this is an audit checklist. We have an auditor coming in. We can kind of fill these out, but of course you can have it. So this is tracking your experiments, any kind of SOPs that you want to have. And these are really cool because it also connects with the rest of your data. So you can see I have these samples that are tagged within this notebook. I can hover over them. I can click them to kind of open that samples page to get some more context of whatever it is I'm working with. And it's really similar to social media where I'm just typing in that @ sign, and then I'm going to just go ahead and type in a sample ID, click on it, and then that's going to be associated with this notebook. So it makes it really easy to kind of keep track of where everything is. You can have multiple authors on these notebooks, so it makes it really easy to collaborate with one another. You can kind of jump from one section to the other. And then once you're done with your notebook, you can submit it for an electronic signature so a manager can sign off on it. Then you can download it into a PDF with any attachments that might be related to it if you need to kind of share it with someone outside of your organization. So one other thing I really want to show, and it's something that I wish I had when I was in the lab, is our sample finder tool. So sample finder allows you to look for samples based off of properties from where it's coming from, like its sources, or different types of tests. If it's outside of range or if it has missing test results, it's very easy to find all your samples that meet that criteria. So when I was in the lab, I wanted to find all of my samples that came from a potential donor that ended up not donating tissue or organs for whatever reason, because then we needed a discard of them. That process took me months, over a year to do with our system, but with Sample Manager would have been really fast. I just would have needed to go click on our donors and then its specific properties. In this case, we're going to look for our mouse with a bulb C strain. And in doing so, it's bringing me up all the different samples. I can see exactly where they are in storage, and then I can discard of them right away. So that would have been something that would have been really nice for me to have in the lab, and I hope you can kind of see how that might work as well. You can also use this to kind of look for expired samples, so you can kind of dispose of them, and you can save these different searches if you're going to be running them pretty often. So this is also looking for all of our samples that have a test range outside of a certain range. So if you have any questions, feel free to kind of leave them in the chat. This was a very basic overview um, to kind of go ahead and set everything up. So I'll kind of read through your questions. As you get them in, if this seemed interesting, I'd be more than happy to set up a more personal demo so we can kind of walk through your specific use case. And then we also offer guided trials. So if Sample Manager seems like it's going to be a good fit for you all and we kind of discuss it a bit more, We can have a trial where we import a portion of your data. It can be real or it can be fake. And then we kind of show how Sample Manager would work for your specific use case, get you up and running. And then anything that you do in that trial, we can actually import to your real server. So it even gets you onboarded a lot faster. We've had great success with that. And I'm really excited about this kind of process of evaluating a software. And then, of course, if you want more information, we have more items on our website, including pricing. We're very transparent. We believe we should have our pricing on here so you know exactly what to expect. We try not to hide anything because we really value our partnerships and wanting to be upfront with you as soon as possible. So I will go ahead and go into the questions that we have today. So let's see. Interested in setting up custom roles and rights to define who can see what in detail. Can you elaborate on the options that can be set within Sample Manager? So that is a great question. So there's a couple of things we can do within Sample Manager. If you want to restrict which information users have access to, like different samples, sources, storage units, you can use folders to partition that information. But then we also have a bunch of different roles that users can have. We have admins, which they can do everything within the system. So we always recommend you only have one or two admins because they can do the most damage, right? Then we have editors, so they can add samples, they can edit them, they can also delete samples. Not everyone wants their users to be able to delete things, so we also have editor without delete. We have readers where they can just view that information. And then we have storage editor where they can check things in and out of storage, storage designer where they can modify your freezers, and then workflow editor is where they can assign tasks to users. Users can have more than one role, so they are additive, but we try to kind of make them a little bit more specific to make sure that users only have the permissions that they need. And then we have a question, how long does it take to set up the lab manager for samples and workflows you have shown today? So that is a great question. It depends on what current state your data is in and how complex your workflows are in. If your data is clean, if you know exactly what you need, I've gotten user set up within a week. So it's very, very fast to do. We work very closely with you to do that. But if your data needs a little bit more work, it's not as clean as you'd like it to be, if you're not entirely sure of what workflows you want, that process can then take 2 to 8 weeks, depending on how fast you work. We're always waiting on our clients for those timelines because we're really fast on our side. But we have lots of forms that we can kind of help you organize what you want your data to look like, and we know kind of what the best practices are. So our onboarding time is definitely a lot faster than others. And then some other questions are how we want to kind of start small. How can we upgrade later on? So some folks will definitely start with just a couple users as they first get implemented. They'll start with our lower tier software, so like Sample Manager Starter. And then once they're comfortable with it, they'll want to upgrade to Sample Manager Professional, start adding workflows and assays. You can upgrade at any point within your contract. We do try to upgrade in buckets of 5 because that's usually when you get the next discount. Because the more users you have, we do discount per user to make it a little bit easier. Um, so you can do that at any point in time. We prorate it, and we try to work very closely with you on that. Can you upload SOPs that are in Word format, or do you have to manually create that in Lab Manager? So if you want to have a workflow that's kind of like this, you would have to kind of manually create what these tasks look like, but you can attach a Word document here as well. So that makes it really easy to kind of double check what your SOPs are. If you want to do it that way, we do support file attachments. You can also kind of copy and paste into an ELN if you want to do it that way. But of course, we can work with you on your SOPs if you'd like us to kind of create those workflows as well. So that's another great question. Let's see. And of course, if you have any other questions, please feel free. It looks like we have a link for a personalized demo in the chat, so please feel free to kind of click on that as well if you wanted to kind of chat more one-on-one. And our YouTube channel is also a great place if you want to look at video tutorials and other features to kind of get a better idea of what Sample Manager can do for you all. Let's see. Is there a limit on the number of sample types we can have or a number of freezers? Do you charge extra for that? No, so we have unlimited sample types, so you can have as many as you'd need. Um, There are some best practices, so sometimes we will tell you maybe you should condense them for user experience, but that is ultimately up to you. And then we also don't charge any extra for different storage units. You can have as many of those as you'd like as well. And it's really easy to kind of configure the layout of these different freezers to have as many different shelves, racks, boxes, drawers. And then these boxes, of course, are also configurable to 10 by 10, 9 by 9, 8 by 4, whatever sizes you have. Um, cool. Can you load donor medical information? Yes. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can have donor medical information, the source types, if assays, if you need it there, you can import it manually through a file upload like a spreadsheet, or you can do it through API. So if you have like RedCap, other kind of donor databases, you can do that. We currently support biobanks that have that information. If you want PHI, you would need the compliant cloud because that is a little bit different than a standard cloud. You might know like your Google Suite's not necessarily HIPAA compliant unless you have the HIPAA compliance there. So there's always kind of something to keep in mind, but you can definitely have donor medical information with that. Can an external hospital access Lab Manager and enter the medical info? If you give them user access to do that, they can. Otherwise, not everyone wants to have their hospital have access to Sample Manager because they can see a lot of, there's a potential that they'd be able to see things that they shouldn't be seeing. You can download like a donor template. So this is going to have the format that they need to be entering everything in. You can share that with them, and then that's an electronic manifest. When they send this template back to you, you would just import from a file, and then they'd be able to have all that information in there. I know our SDMS product does a little bit more with having external users kind of add things to that, kind of like a portal, but that is kind of a different software altogether. But it does include Sample Manager too. Cool. All right. Are there other questions? Anything else? Feel free to leave it in the chat. But for those that are kind of around, thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. Feel free to schedule a personal demo with me, and I hope to hear from you all soon.